In a quiet little town nestled in the heart of the Midwest, life moved at its own pace. The streets were lined with cozy houses, and the air always carried the faint scent of freshly baked bread from the local bakery. It was here that a young woman lived her days, balancing work, family, and a heart full of kindness. She wasn't someone who sought attention or fame. She simply believed in doing what was right, even if it meant going out of her way to help others. This woman worked as a nurse at the nearby hospital, a job she loved deeply. Every day she walked into those hospital doors ready to care for patients, whether they were newborns, elderly folks, or anyone in between. Her coworkers often joked that she had a superpower, a sixth sense for knowing when someone needed extra comfort or support. But to her, it wasn't anything special, it was just how she was wired. Helping people came naturally to her. One crisp autumn morning, after finishing an exhausting overnight shift, she decided to stop by a community blood drive set up in the parking lot outside the hospital. Blood drives weren't uncommon in the area, and she had participated in them before. In fact, donating blood had become something of a habit for her over the years. She didn't think much of it. It was just another way to give back to the community. As she filled out the paperwork and waited her turn, she noticed a buzz of activity around her. Nurses and volunteers scurried about, their faces tense with urgency. Something unusual was happening. Curious, she asked one of the organizers what was going on. The response sent a chill down her spine. A critically ill child had been rushed to the hospital earlier that morning, and doctors were desperately searching for a match for an emergency blood transfusion. Time was running out, and without the right donor, the situation looked grim. Without a second thought, she raised her hand. "I'll do it," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. She knew the risks involved. Donating blood could leave her feeling weak or lightheaded, but none of that mattered. If there was even the slightest chance her blood could save this child's life, she was willing to take it. The process was quick but intense. As she lay back in the donation chair, watching the crimson liquid flow into the bag attached to the machine, her mind wandered. Who was this child? What did their family look like? Were they sitting in a hospital waiting room somewhere, praying for a miracle? These questions swirled in her head, but she pushed them aside. All that mattered now was doing her part. What she didn't know, and couldn't possibly have guessed, was that this act of generosity would set off a chain reaction that would alter the course of her life forever. The child she was helping was no ordinary patient. He was the son of one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the world. This man, a billionaire tech mogul known for his groundbreaking innovations, rarely stepped into the public eye. Yet when news reached him about his son's dire condition, he dropped everything and raced to the hospital. For hours he paced the sterile corridors of the pediatric ward, his heart heavy with fear. His empire might span continents, but in that moment, all he cared about was the fragile little boy lying in the hospital bed. Money couldn't buy health, and power couldn't guarantee survival. All he could do was wait and hope. Meanwhile, the nurse returned home, completely unaware of the impact she'd made. To her, it had been just another day, another opportunity to lend a hand. She tucked her kids into bed that night, kissed their foreheads, and went about her routine, oblivious to the fact that her simple act of kindness had caught the attention of someone whose reach extended far beyond anything she could imagine. Little did she know, her name was already being whispered in hushed tones among the hospital staff. The doctors and nurses marveled at the perfect compatibility of her blood type with the child's, calling it nothing short of miraculous. And while she slept soundly, dreaming of grocery lists and school projects, plans were quietly being made to ensure she would never forget the difference she had made, not just for one family but for countless lives yet to come. That single decision, to donate her blood on a chilly autumn morning, would soon connect her to a world she never dreamed existed. But for now, she remained blissfully unaware, living her life one kind deed at a time. The next few days passed in a blur for the child's father. He barely slept, his mind consumed by worry and fear. His son was stable now, thanks to the blood transfusion, but he couldn't shake the image of the frail little boy lying motionless in the hospital bed. It was a side of life he wasn't used to seeing, vulnerable, fragile, and completely out of his control. For all his wealth and influence, there was nothing he could do to speed up the recovery process. All he could do was wait. As the hours turned into days, the doctors began sharing cautiously optimistic updates. The child's body was responding well to the treatment, and his vital signs were improving steadily. The billionaire sat by his son's bedside, holding his tiny hand, whispering words of encouragement even though he wasn't sure if the boy could hear him. Every small movement, every flutter of eyelids, felt like a victory. Slowly but surely, the color returned to the child's cheeks and his breathing became less labored. Hope started to creep back into the father's heart. But amidst all the relief and gratitude, one question lingered in his mind. Who had donated the blood that saved his son? The hospital staff had mentioned it came from a local donor, a woman who had simply shown up at a routine blood drive that day. To him, this person wasn't just a random stranger, she was a hero. She had stepped forward without knowing whose life she might save, and her selflessness had given him a second chance with his son. Determined to learn more about her, he reached out to the hospital administration. At first they hesitated, citing privacy concerns, but when he explained his intentions to express his gratitude personally, they agreed to share some basic information. What they told him only deepened his admiration. The donor was a nurse, at the same hospital where his son was being treated. She was a single mother, working long shifts to support her family while still finding time to volunteer and give back to her community. Her life was far from easy, yet she radiated kindness and resilience. Curiosity got the better of him. Using his resources discreetly, he began piecing together fragments of her story. He learned that she juggled multiple responsibilities, working late nights at the hospital, helping her kids with homework and managing household chores, all while maintaining a positive attitude. She didn't have much in terms of material wealth, but she seemed rich in spirit. This struck a chord with him. In his world, success was often measured by money and accomplishments, but here was someone who defined success differently, by compassion, hard work, and making a difference in the lives of others. He found himself thinking about her constantly. How could someone with so little still give so much? What drove her to keep going despite the challenges she faced? These questions intrigued him, not because he wanted to analyze her, but because he genuinely wanted to understand her perspective on life. He realized that in many ways she reminded him of the values he'd once held dear before success and fame changed him. One evening, as he sat alone in his hotel room overlooking the quiet town, he made a decision. He would meet her, not as a billionaire or a powerful figure, but as a father who owed her everything. He didn't want to overwhelm her or make her uncomfortable, so he planned his approach carefully. He decided to attend a local charity event, where she was volunteering, hoping to cross paths naturally. If nothing else, he thought maybe he could catch a glimpse of the woman who had unknowingly changed his life forever. When the day of the event arrived, he dressed casually, trying to blend in with the crowd. The gala was held in a modest community center, filled with locals who cared deeply about giving back. As he mingled among them, he kept an eye out for her. And then finally, he saw her. She stood near the registration table, greeting guests with a warm smile. She looked tired but radiant, her eyes lighting up whenever she spoke to someone. There was an authenticity about her that drew people in, and he could see why she was so beloved in the community. Summoning his courage, he approached her. "Hi," he said, extending his hand. "I'm one of the donors for tonight's event. Thank you for all your hard work." She shook his hand, looking surprised but pleased. "Oh, thank you for supporting us," she replied. "It means a lot." They started talking, and to his amazement, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They discussed everything from healthcare challenges to parenting struggles, and he found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. She listened intently, nodding along and sharing anecdotes from her own life. There was no pretense, no agenda, just two people connecting over shared experiences. By the end of the night, they exchanged numbers, agreeing to stay in touch. It wasn't until a few days later, when she received a handwritten note delivered to her doorstep, that she realized who he truly was. The envelope contained a heartfelt message thanking her for her dedication to helping others. It was signed simply, "A Grateful Father." Confused but touched, she reread the note several times before realizing its significance. This was the man whose son she had helped save, the billionaire everyone talked about but rarely saw. Her initial reaction was disbelief. Why would someone like him take the time to write her a note? She had done what anyone else in her position would have done. Nothing extraordinary in her opinion. Still, she appreciated the gesture and decided to call him to express her gratitude for his kind words. During their conversation, she emphasized that she didn't expect anything in return for what she had done. Saving lives was part of her job, and she believed strongly in paying it forward. To her surprise, he laughed softly. "You may not see it as extraordinary," he said, "but I do. You've reminded me of something I almost forgot. That true wealth isn't about how much you have, but how much you give." His words stayed with her long after they hung up the phone. She went about her daily routine, trying to process the surreal turn of events. Meanwhile, he continued to think about her, wondering how he could repay her kindness in a way that honored her humility and generosity. Little did either of them know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would bring them closer than they ever imagined, and change both their lives in profound ways. The days following their phone call were filled with quiet reflection for both of them. The nurse couldn't stop thinking about the man who had taken the time to express such heartfelt gratitude. It wasn't just his wealth or fame that struck her, it was the sincerity in his voice, the genuine emotion behind every word he spoke. She had always believed that kindness should be its own reward, but hearing someone acknowledge her efforts so openly made her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. For the billionaire, those brief conversations left an indelible mark on his heart. He found himself revisiting their chat over and over again in his mind. Her humility, her resilience, her unwavering commitment to helping others. It all resonated deeply with him. In a world where people often sought recognition or reward for their actions, here was someone who gave without expecting anything in return. She reminded him of the values he'd once cherished but had somehow lost sight of amidst the chaos of building an empire. Determined to show his gratitude in a meaningful way, he began brainstorming ideas. He knew she wouldn't accept lavish gifts or extravagant gestures. She wasn't that kind of person. Instead, he decided to focus on improving her life in subtle, practical ways that aligned with her needs. Using his resources discreetly, he arranged for some long-standing burdens in her life to be lifted. First, he paid off her student loans, a weight she had been carrying for years. Then, he hired contractors to fix the leaky roof and broken heater in her home, issues she had been postponing because she simply couldn't afford the repairs. Finally, he set up scholarships for her children, ensuring they would have access to quality education without the financial strain that had weighed heavily on her shoulders. At first, she had no idea what was happening. One morning, she received a letter informing her that her student loans had been cleared. Confused and overwhelmed, she called the loan provider to confirm it wasn't a mistake. They assured her it was real, though they couldn't disclose who had covered the payments. A few weeks later, workers showed up at her house unannounced, claiming they were there to fix the roof. When she protested, saying she hadn't scheduled anything, they handed her a note. "Consider this a small thank you." No signature, no explanation, just those simple words. By the time the third surprise arrived, an envelope containing full scholarships for her kids, she knew exactly who was behind it all. Though nothing was explicitly stated, the pattern was clear. This went beyond coincidence. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and unmistakably tied to the billionaire she had met at the charity gala. She wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was incredibly grateful. These acts of generosity alleviated stressors that had haunted her for years, allowing her to focus more on her family and career. On the other hand, she felt uneasy accepting such immense help. She didn't want to feel indebted, nor did she want to blur the lines of their relationship. After much thought, she decided to confront him directly. One afternoon, she called him and asked if they could meet. They agreed to grab coffee at a cozy little cafe downtown, away from prying eyes. As they sat across from each other, steam rising from their cups, she took a deep breath and got straight to the point. "I think we need to talk about what's been going on," she said, her tone firm yet gentle. "I know you're behind all of these surprises. And while I'm incredibly thankful, I also need to understand why." He nodded, as if he'd been expecting this conversation. Leaning forward slightly, he explained his reasoning. "When you saved my son's life, you gave me something I can never repay, the chance to watch him grow up, to see him laugh and play and dream big. That's priceless. But I also realized that your life isn't easy. You work tirelessly to support your family, and you still find time to give back to others. I wanted to ease some of your burdens, not out of obligation, but out of respect and admiration." She listened intently, her expression softening as he spoke. When he finished, she sighed, shaking her head slightly. "I appreciate everything you've done," she said, "but I want you to know I didn't save your son's life expecting anything in return. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And honestly, knowing that he's okay is enough for me." Her honesty caught him off guard, but it also reinforced his respect for her. Here was someone who truly embodied the spirit of selflessness, someone who refused to let material things define her worth. He smiled faintly, nodding in agreement. "I understand," he said, "and I promise, this isn't about changing who you are. If anything, it's about honoring the person you already are." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, delving deeper into their lives and perspectives. She shared stories about her childhood, growing up in a tight-knit community where neighbors looked out for each other. He opened up about the pressures of running a global business and how it had distanced him from the simpler joys of life. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they discovered a shared belief in the importance of compassion and connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the cafe, they parted ways with a renewed sense of understanding. For her, it was comforting to know that someone as powerful as him could still value human connection above all else. For him, it was inspiring to witness firsthand the impact of living a life rooted in kindness and humility. Over the next few months, their friendship continued to blossom. They stayed in touch regularly, exchanging texts and occasionally meeting for meals or walks in the park. Their bond wasn't based on dependency or obligation. It was built on mutual respect and a desire to uplift one another. People around them began to notice their closeness, speculating about the nature of their relationship. Some assumed romance was involved, but both of them knew better. What they shared transcended physical attraction. It was a partnership grounded in trust, gratitude, and shared values. Meanwhile, the billionaire's son, now fully recovered, started forming a special connection with the nurse, too. The boy, curious and full of energy, loved visiting her house with his father. He brought handmade cards and drawings, eager to show her how much he appreciated her. To him, she wasn't just the woman who had saved his life. She was like a second mother, someone who radiated warmth and care. Watching their interactions warmed the billionaire's heart. Seeing his son thrive under her influence reminded him of the profound ripple effect one act of kindness could create. By donating her blood that fateful autumn morning, she hadn't just saved a child's life. She had forged bonds that spanned generations, bridging gaps between strangers and turning them into family. Though neither of them could have predicted how their paths would intertwine, they both recognized the beauty in the journey. Life had thrown them together in unexpected ways, and through their shared experiences they had discovered something invaluable: the power of human connection to heal, inspire, and transform. Life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and for the nurse and the billionaire, that test came sooner than either of them expected. Just as things seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm, her life easing thanks to his quiet generosity, their friendship growing deeper, the universe decided to throw another curveball. This time it wasn't about him or his son. It was about her youngest child. It started with something small, a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. At first, she thought it was just a seasonal cold, nothing to worry about. But when the Cough lingered for weeks and was joined by fatigue and unexplained bruises. Alarm bells began ringing in her mind. She took her child to the doctor hoping for reassurance, but instead, she received devastating news. Her little one had a rare blood disorder that required immediate and extensive treatment. The diagnosis hit her like a freight train. As a nurse, she understood the medical jargon, the prognosis, and the long road ahead. But as a mother, she felt utterly powerless. The treatments were expensive, far beyond what she could afford even with her steady income. Despite the scholarships and financial relief provided earlier, this new challenge threatened to undo everything she had worked so hard to stabilize. She didn't want to burden anyone, least of all the billionaire who had already done so much for her. So she kept the news to herself, trying to figure out how to navigate this storm alone. Nights were sleepless, filled with tears and prayers. Days blurred together as she juggled work, caring for her sick child, and keeping up appearances for her other kids. Yet no matter how hard she tried to stay strong, the weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders, threatening to break her. Meanwhile, the billionaire sensed something was wrong. They had been in regular contact since their coffee meeting, exchanging messages and occasionally catching up over phone calls. But lately, her responses had grown shorter, more distant. When he asked if everything was okay, she brushed it off, saying she was just busy with work and family. Something in her tone told him otherwise, but he respected her privacy and didn't push further, at least not right away. One evening, while scrolling through social media, he stumbled upon a post from a mutual acquaintance. It was a fundraiser, page set up to help cover medical expenses for her child. The details were sparse, but the urgency was clear. His heart sank as he read through the comments, seeing friends and neighbors rallying around her during this difficult time. He immediately called her, his voice laced with concern. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked gently, skipping formalities. "I could have helped." Her silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Finally, after a long pause, she admitted the truth. "I didn't want you to feel like you had to do anything," she said, her voice trembling. "You've already done so much for me. I can't keep asking for your help every time something goes wrong." He sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and admiration. Her reluctance to lean on others was admirable, but it also frustrated him because it meant she was shouldering this immense burden alone. "Listen to me," he said firmly yet kindly. "You're not asking, I'm offering. And trust me, I want to do this. Let me be there for you, the way you were there for me and my son." Her defenses crumbled under the sincerity of his words. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to cry, not out of despair, but out of relief. Someone cared enough to step in, to share the load she had been carrying alone. Over the next few days, he sprang into action, using his vast network. To ensure her child received the best possible care, he arranged consultations with top specialists, covered the costs of treatments, and even coordinated transportation so she wouldn't have to worry about logistics. But what touched her most was how he handled everything with such discretion. There were no grand announcements, no press releases touting his philanthropy. Everything was done quietly, behind the scenes, with the sole intention of easing her stress. He visited her at the hospital during appointments, sitting patiently, in waiting rooms and bringing snacks or books to pass the time. Sometimes they barely spoke, but his presence alone was comforting, a reminder that she wasn't facing this battle alone. As her child underwent treatment, the billionaire's son became an unexpected source of joy and distraction. The boy adored visiting the hospital, bringing toys and games to cheer up his newfound friend. Their laughter echoed through the sterile hallways, lifting spirits and reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, light could still shine. Through it all, the bond between the nurse and the billionaire deepened. They leaned on each other, not just as benefactor and beneficiary, but as two people navigating life's challenges side by side. Conversations grew more personal, touching on fears, hopes, and dreams for the future. He confided in her about the loneliness that came with his success, the pressure to constantly prove himself, and the longing for simpler days. She shared her own struggles, the guilt of not being able to provide more for her kids, the exhaustion of juggling too many responsibilities, and the fear of losing someone she loved. Their connection transcended labels. To outsiders, they might have looked like an unlikely pair, a billionaire and a nurse from opposite ends of the socioeconomic spectrum. But to them, none of that mattered. What united them was their humanity, the shared desire to protect those they loved, to make the world a little kinder, and to find meaning in the face of adversity. Slowly but surely, her child began responding to treatment. Each milestone, whether it was gaining strength, showing improvement in lab results, or simply smiling again, felt like a victory. The nurse couldn't help but marvel at how fate had brought these two families together. If it hadn't been for that random blood drive months ago, she never would have crossed paths with the billionaire, and now here they were, standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting for the same thing: life. One afternoon, as they sat together in the hospital cafeteria sipping lukewarm coffee, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how strange life is?" she asked. "How one decision can change everything?" He chuckled softly, nodding. "All the time," he replied. "When you donated your blood, you probably didn't think it would lead to any of this. But look, where we are now. You saved my son's life, and now I get to help yours. It's like, I don't know, karma or something." She smiled, shaking her head. "I don't believe in karma," she said. "I just believe in doing what's right. Life gives us opportunities to make a difference, and sometimes those differences come back to us in ways we never expect." Her words stayed with him long after they left the hospital that day. They reminded him of why he admired her so deeply, not just for her actions, but for the philosophy that guided them. In a world obsessed with rewards and recognition, she chose to act selflessly, trusting that good deeds would ripple outward and create positive change. As her child's health continued to improve, the billionaire found himself reflecting on his own journey. Before meeting her, he had become disconnected from the very values that had driven him early in life: compassion, humility, and purpose. Now, inspired by her example, he felt a renewed sense of direction. Together, they began brainstorming ways to give back to the community that had supported them both. Ideas flowed freely, starting a foundation to fund medical research, organizing free health camps, advocating for better healthcare policies. The possibilities were endless, fueled by their shared vision of a brighter future. What started as a single act of kindness, a drop of blood given without hesitation, had grown into something far greater. It had forged friendships, healed wounds, and ignited a passion for making a lasting impact. Neither of them could predict exactly where this path would lead, but one thing was certain: they were ready to walk it together, hand in hand, hearts full of hope and gratitude. As months turned into years, the nurse and the billionaire found themselves growing closer, not just as friends, but as partners in a shared mission. They had weathered storms together, supported each other through personal challenges, and discovered a mutual passion for creating change that went beyond their individual lives. What started as gratitude on his part and humility on hers had evolved into a deep, unshakable bond built on trust, respect, and a desire to leave the world better than they found it. Their friendship became the talk of the town. People whispered about how unlikely it was: a billionaire working alongside a nurse from a small community. Some speculated about romance, while others dismissed it as charity. But those who truly knew them understood that their connection ran deeper than societal labels or assumptions. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about two people who saw value in each other's humanity and chose to stand by one another no matter what. Inspired by her selflessness and driven by his resources, they decided to take their collaboration to the next level. Together, they founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving access to health care for underserved communities. The idea came naturally after witnessing firsthand how financial barriers could prevent families from getting the care they needed. For her, it was an extension of the work she already did at the hospital, just on a larger scale. For him, it was a chance to channel his wealth and influence into something meaningful, something that honored the values she had taught him. The launch of the foundation was met with widespread support. Local businesses donated supplies, volunteers signed up in droves, and media outlets covered their efforts extensively. The nurse took charge of organizing health camps, coordinating with doctors and nurses to provide free checkups, vaccinations, and consultations. The billionaire handled the logistics, using his connections to secure funding, equipment, and venues. Their teamwork was seamless, each playing to their strengths while respecting the other's expertise. One of the first initiatives they launched was a mobile clinic program. Equipped with state-of-the-art medical gear, these clinics traveled to remote areas where access to healthcare was limited or non-existent. The nurse often accompanied the teams, rolling up her sleeves to assist patients and train local caregivers. Seeing her in action, calm under pressure, compassionate yet efficient, only reinforced the billionaire's admiration for her. She had a way of making everyone feel seen and heard, whether they were elderly folks struggling with chronic illnesses or children scared of needles. For the billionaire, this experience was transformative. Growing up, he had always been told that success meant climbing higher, achieving more, accumulating wealth. But working alongside her showed him a different kind of success, one rooted in service, empathy, and impact. He began spending less time in boardrooms and more time in the field, listening to stories from the people they served. These interactions reminded him of why he had started this journey in the first place, not to build an empire, but to make a difference. Their partnership extended beyond the foundation. They traveled together, advocating for policy changes and raising awareness about healthcare disparities. From speaking engagements at conferences to meetings with government officials, they made a formidable team. Her authenticity resonated with audiences, while his credibility opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed. Together, they inspired countless individuals to join their cause, proving that collaboration across different walks of life could yield extraordinary results. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of their relationship was how it brought their families closer. The billionaire's son adored her kids, treating them like siblings. Weekends were spent playing games, baking cookies, or exploring parks together. The boy never missed an opportunity to remind her how grateful he was for saving his life, often gifting her handmade cards and drawings. To him, she wasn't just a hero, she was family. Her own children, too, grew fond of the billionaire, seeing him as a mentor and friend, rather than a distant figure of wealth and power. They admired his humility and kindness, qualities that mirrored what their mother instilled in them every day. Watching their bond deepen filled her with pride, knowing that her kids were learning valuable lessons about compassion, generosity, and resilience. Despite their busy schedules, they made time for simple moments, shared meals, quiet conversations, laughter-filled evenings. These small joys anchored them amidst the whirlwind of their work. Whether it was sitting on her porch watching the sunset or enjoying a cup of tea in his cozy study, they cherished the ordinary moments that reminded them of what truly mattered. Of course, there were challenges along the way. Critics questioned their motives, accusing them of seeking publicity or using the foundation as a tax write-off. Others doubted whether their efforts could create lasting change, dismissing their work as a drop in the ocean. But neither of them let negativity deter them. Instead, they focused on the tangible impact they were making. One patient, one community, one life at a time. Through it all, they remained grounded, always remembering the core reason they had come together, an act of kindness that had sparked a chain reaction. Every milestone they achieved, the opening of a new clinic, the passing of a healthcare bill, the smile of a child receiving treatment, was a testament to the power of human connection. They proved that when people unite for a common purpose, boundaries fade, differences dissolve, and miracles happen. Years later, as they stood side by side at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for a state-of-the-art children's hospital funded by their foundation, they reflected on how far they had come. The hospital bore witness to their journey, a symbol of hope, resilience, and unwavering determination. As cameras flashed and applause filled the air, she leaned over and whispered, "Do you remember that blood drive? The one where none of this seemed possible? He grinned, nodding. How could I forget? It changed everything for both of us. In that moment, surrounded by supporters, beneficiaries, and loved ones, they realized that their story wasn't just about them. It was about the countless lives touched by their efforts, the ripple effect of kindness that continued to spread long after that fateful autumn morning. Their legacy wasn't written in headlines or bank accounts. It was etched in the hearts of those they helped, in the smiles of children given a second chance, in the belief that even the smallest acts of goodness can transform the world. And so, their journey continued, not as a nurse and a billionaire, but as two souls united by a shared vision, determined to keep giving, keep fighting, and keep inspiring others to do the same. Because in the end, life isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by the love we share, the lives we touch, and the light we bring to the darkness. Quen 2.5 Max. The years rolled on, and the nurse and the billionaire's partnership blossomed into something greater than either of them could have imagined. What began as a simple act of kindness, a drop of blood given without hesitation, had grown into a movement that spanned continents. Their nonprofit organization thrived, expanding its reach to rural villages in developing countries, war-torn regions, and underserved urban neighborhoods. Together, they built clinics, trained local healthcare workers, and provided life-saving treatments to thousands who otherwise would have been left behind. But beyond the accolades, the awards, and the headlines lay the heart of their work. People. Every patient they helped, every family they supported, reminded them why they had started this journey in the first place. For her, it was about ensuring no one felt the helplessness she once did when her child fell ill. For him, it was about using his resources not for personal gain, but for collective good. They weren't just changing lives, they were redefining what success meant. Their bond deepened with time, though it remained steadfastly platonic. There was no romance between them, nor did they feel the need for one. Their connection went beyond physical attraction. It was rooted in mutual respect, shared values, and an unspoken understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. She admired his ability to dream big and execute flawlessly, while he marveled at her unwavering compassion and tireless dedication. Together, they balanced each other out, creating a synergy that inspired everyone around them, even as their foundation grew. They never lost sight of the small moments that made their friendship so special. Whether it was sharing laughter over a failed cooking attempt or sitting quietly under the stars after a long day of work, these snippets of normalcy kept them grounded. They often joked that their meetings consisted more of coffee breaks and silly banter than formal discussions, and that was exactly how they liked it. After all, life wasn't just about grand gestures, it was also about finding joy in the everyday. Their children grew up side by side, forming bonds that mirrored their parents. The billionaire's son, now a teenager, considered her kids his siblings. He often referred to her as Mom too, much to her amusement. His admiration for her hadn't faded with time. If anything, it had grown stronger. To him, she represented everything good in the world: kindness, strength, and selflessness. In turn, her kids looked up to him as a role model, someone who used his privilege to uplift others rather than isolate himself. One summer, during a trip to a remote village where their foundation had recently opened a clinic, the two families traveled together. It was a rare opportunity for them to step away from their busy lives and immerse themselves in the reality of the work they were doing. The days were long and exhausting, filled with treating patients, distributing supplies, and teaching locals basic medical skills. But the nights were magical, spent around campfires, listening to stories, singing songs, and watching the sky light up with stars. On the final evening of the trip, as they sat together overlooking a vast field bathed in moonlight, the billionaire turned to her with a reflective smile. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" he asked softly. She tilted her head, considering the question. "Probably," she replied with a grin. "But I think the bigger question is, does it matter? We're here now, aren't we? That's what counts." Her response struck a chord within him. She was right. The past didn't define them, their actions did. And through their combined efforts, they had created something far greater than themselves. This realization filled him with a profound sense of gratitude, not just for her but for the circumstances that had brought them together. As the years passed, their impact only grew. The foundation became synonymous with innovation and compassion, earning recognition from global leaders and organizations. Yet despite the fame and attention, they remained humble, always prioritizing the needs of those they served over any desire for personal glory. They knew that true fulfillment came not from praise, but from knowing they had made a difference. Eventually, they decided to take their advocacy even further. Realizing that systemic change required policy reform, they began lobbying governments and international bodies to prioritize healthcare access. Their arguments were backed by data, stories, and undeniable evidence of the transformative power of accessible care. Slowly but surely, they saw progress. Laws changed, budgets shifted, and communities flourished. Through it all, they continued to support each other personally, too. When her eldest child graduated high school, he stood proudly beside her, cheering, alongside her family. When his company faced a major crisis, she offered advice and encouragement, reminding him of the resilience he had shown in building his empire. Their lives intertwined in ways neither could have predicted, yet both cherished deeply. Looking back, they realized that their story wasn't just about two individuals. It was about the ripple effect of kindness. Her decision to donate blood that autumn morning hadn't just saved a child's life. It had sparked a chain reaction that touched countless others. From easing financial burdens to funding scholarships, from building hospitals to advocating for policy changes, their collaboration proved that one act of generosity could create waves of positive change. At the heart of it all was a simple truth. Humanity thrives when we lift each other up. The billionaire, once consumed by the pursuit of wealth and power, had rediscovered the joy of giving. The nurse, who had always believed in helping others, found validation in seeing her values reflected in someone else's actions. Together, they demonstrated that regardless of background or circumstance, everyone has the capacity to make a difference. Years later, when they finally slowed down enough to reflect on their journey, they found themselves standing hand in hand at the edge of a serene lake. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Around them, nature hummed with life, a reminder of the beauty and fragility of existence. "I never thought my life would turn out like this," she said quietly, her voice tinged with awe, "all because I showed up at a blood drive one day." He chuckled, squeezing her hand gently. "And I never thought I'd meet someone like you, someone who reminded me of what truly matters." They stood there in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their words settle between them. Then almost simultaneously they smiled. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Through challenges and triumphs, they had built something extraordinary, not just a foundation or a legacy, but a testament to the power of human connection. In the end, their story wasn't about wealth or fame. It wasn't about titles or achievements. It was about two people who chose to see the best in each other and, in doing so, inspired the world to do the same. Because in the grand tapestry of life, it's not the threads of gold that stand out. It's the ones woven with love, kindness, and purpose.